Senator Marco Rubio joins me now, who is one of two senators from the state of Florida. And do you get tired of being asked whether or not you're going to run for president?
No, it's an honor to be asked, to even be considered, if people would think that I'd be someone to do it. I just honestly don't know yet. I mean, we have for me, it's never been about the title, per se. I know it's an important job, and it's one that one needs to be prepared to do, but beyond it, it has to be for the right reasons. I've always thought that too many people go into politics because they can win, not because they know what they're going to do when they get there. So I want to make sure if I do something like that, or even run for re-election for that matter, that we're doing it for the right reasons. Well,
and when do you know if you have those right reasons lined up?
Well, I know why I want to be in public service, and that is because I believe that America is unique and special. I believe that's worth not just preserving, but expanding to reach more people than ever in our country. I think there's no reason why the 21st century can't also be an American century, and I believe that we can make our economy the best in the world again, equip our people with 21st century skills, and reassert a strong America in global affairs. The 21st century is going to be better than the 20th century.
How have we been doing?
Where's the best place for me to further that agenda?
I'm sorry, Senator. How have we been doing in that regard? It seems like we are now viewed as weak and ineffectual around the planet.
Well, the president is. I'm not sure America's viewed as weak and ineffectual. I think other countries know quite well what America's capable of doing and can do when our people set its mind to something. I believe that there is a lack of trust in the leadership of this political leadership of the United States, beginning with the president. He's proven to be unreliable, unpredictable, sometimes, quite frankly, erratic in some of his decision-making. And I do think that's undermined our national credibility with respect to this president. But I think we can quickly overcome that with new leadership.
Let's come back to that in a moment. Let me ask you about the ObamaCare bailout, and please explain to people why there would have to be a bailout of some of the insurance companies as a result of the president's law, the one that bears his name.
Well, there's a concept in insurance, and it's called a risk corridor, and it's a legitimate concept. Let's say you have a market with 50 insurance companies. All of them pay a fee into this fund, so that 49 of them make a profit, one of them makes a big mistake and is about to go under, and this fund comes in and kicks in as a reinsurance fund, paid for with their money. That's a legitimate thing that you use in insurance. Here's the problem. They created one of those for ObamaCare. The problem is that in ObamaCare, of the 25, 30 companies, it's not one or two that's going to go have massive losses. It's most of them. So suddenly, because the exchanges have become basically a high-risk pool, not a normal insurance, and there's not going to be enough money in that fund from the fees these companies and the profits these companies are paying to fund the bailout, to fund the reinsurance. So where's the money going to come from? Well, the money is going to come from the taxpayer. It's going to come from you and from me and from American taxpayers to bail out these companies who participated in ObamaCare and then are losing money on it. And so the point I'm making in the letter that we sent today to Speaker Boehner is, if they're going to spend taxpayer money, they have to come through Congress to do that, because that's appropriated funding. All of the applicable agencies that have looked at it agree with us. This can't just be President Obama unilaterally deciding to send them a check. He can't do it, and we shouldn't do it.
But do you think he'll do it anyway if Congress doesn't act?
Well, it would certainly be illegal. There's no doubt. I mean, it would be indisputable that it would be illegal. The president cannot spend unappropriated monies. These are monies that the Congress has the power of the purse. It's very clear. The president can't just decide to budget something and spend it. Now, once we've given him the money, he can decide how to spend it or at what pace, but he cannot decide to just write a blank check out of the Treasury to spend on something like this if it hasn't been given to him by the Congress, and the Congress has not given him this authority. So I don't believe he will because of how blatantly illegal it would be to do it.
Although, would it be fair to say, in your opinion, the president has done blatantly illegal or unconstitutional things during his term?
Well, there's no doubt he has stretched beyond the constitutional powers of his office, but nothing to the extent that this would be. I mean, this would be clearly the others are where he's really stretched the Constitution beyond its parameters. This would just be completely ignoring it, just throwing it away in the garbage and saying, I don't care anymore. And, quite frankly, it won't work that way, because I think many of the insurance companies would be uncomfortable to receive this money, knowing that a court can come in and take it back and order them to repay it. I think the likelier scenario would be that these companies, who are all already crawling all over the Capitol with all their lobbyists, trying to get their money, that these companies would come out and say things like, well, if you do this, we're going to have to raise premiums, we're going to have to take people's insurance away, all the same arguments you heard to defend Obamacare. A lot of these companies are now fully in bed with Obamacare because they stand to get bailed out by it.
I'm talking to Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. So, Senator, I could see the argument on one hand that they say, look, you made us do this. You reformed insurance in America. You made us cover a bunch of things that people never chose to buy. You made us come up, enter into this system, and you forced us to do this, so you should pay the tab. On the other hand, as far as I'm concerned, when private companies make bad mistakes or insure people that turn out in a deal where it doesn't pencil out, why the heck should the American taxpayer bail them out?
Well, first, let's be clear. No one made them do this. Many of these companies voluntarily decided to offer an insurance plan in the exchange. Many of these companies lobbied for and supported Obamacare when it was being voted on because what they thought is it was going to force all Americans to have to buy what they sell, which is insurance. If you're in a business and the government passes a law that says you have to buy what Lars Larson sells, it's a pretty good deal for you. And that's what these companies thought to themselves. Oh, the law is going to force them to buy what we sell. The problem is once they got into this business, they realized, hey, this is not as good as we thought. And then the president changed the rules on them unilaterally by deciding to waive the employer mandate and let people keep the insurance they had. So now they're coming back and saying, hold on, it's not working out for us anymore. We want to be bailed out. We want to be bailed out with taxpayer money. And I just think that's wrong. These companies should have folded and said, look, sorry, we don't want to participate in the exchange anymore. We were wrong to have supported Obamacare. But no matter what, we should not have to pay for it. We should not be bailing out another group of massive companies like we did banks and others because they have good lobbyists. We just shouldn't.
Senator, I agree with you that when private companies goof, and especially when they lobby for the law, they should either rise or fall on their own profits. And if they fall, let them go out of business. They'll be replaced. But doesn't that give the president exactly what he wants? A lot of us think that the whole aim of this scheme of Obamacare was to put the private insurance companies out of business and give the Democrats, your Democrat friends on Capitol Hill, an excuse to say, you see, the private sector has failed, and now we have to replace it with a government plan like Canada or Great Britain. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think that I don't know. I think what the president, one of the designs of Obamacare is to say, I told you private insurance will not offer these plans. That's why we're going to have to go to a single payer system. And I think there's still a thought behind some of this in their way. They're thinking either way they're going to win. Either we're going to force these insurance companies through this bailout to continue to offer plans on the exchange at a subsidized rate now, of course, or they'll just say private companies won't do it. We're going to have a single payer system. What bothers me is simple. And that is that the taxpayer is once again on the hook for all of this. What bothers me is I go in the Capitol and I run into all these lobbyists crawling all over the Capitol, fighting on behalf of these insurance companies who want their money. But our job is to fight on behalf of the taxpayer whose money they want. And it isn't fair to the taxpayer. Now, I think it's terrible that some of these companies are going to suffer some losses because they participated in Obamacare, but the taxpayer shouldn't have to pay the price for that.
So do we let some of them just flat go out of business? Well,
they won't go out of business. What will happen is they'll no longer be able to participate in the exchange. But you know what? The exchange is never going to work. It is not an actuarially sound system. It is a high-risk pool. The people signing up for these exchanges, some of them are not making their monthly payments on a regular basis. Many of whom are realizing they have $1,200. Look, I'll give you a story. I was at the emergency room the other day in South Florida. My son had a minor thing. We took him over to be seen because it was Sunday. And a lady there was complaining, and I could overhear what she was complaining about. She got a $1,000 bill handed to her. And she's like, well, how can this be? I have Obamacare. And the background noise was, well, you have a deductible. You have a copayment. So her argument was, so you're telling me I have to have $1,000 cash before I can even begin to use my insurance? And the answer is yes. And a lot of people don't realize that. So that's becoming a problem with signing people up again. A lot of the people that enrolled in Obamacare have not consistently made their payment. And for many people, it doesn't cover nearly as much as they thought it did. So this whole thing is not going to work despite what the mainstream media might be reporting. I hope to, in the next couple months here, introduce with some other member of the House that I'm working with on an alternative to Obamacare to really give Americans the opportunity to buy health insurance they can afford and want from any company that will sell it to them.
I think that's a fantastic idea to replace this thing. And I understand a lot of people have been frustrated that Republicans haven't said, here is the replacement plan. But I know that a lot of plans have been proposed. I'm talking with Florida's U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about some of the president's promises, about Ebola, about the Islamic State, and about America's response to all of that and the president's response to all of that. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show. All right. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Senator Marco Rubio is with me. Senator, we've talked about Obamacare. Let's talk about a real medical problem, and that is Ebola. So far, the president's response and our government's response to this seems to be both ham-handed and ineffectual. We've already had a man die of Ebola in this country who came to this country after he was already sick with the disease. What should we be doing?
Well, first of all, let me say this is a new thing that we're facing. There's not a lot of established protocols about it because we haven't faced this before. I think many of the things that are being done now are the ones that are correct, maybe should have been done a week ago or 2 weeks ago, but they're the right ones. I think increased scrutiny at the airports and ports of entry. Certainly, I have confidence that most of the hospitals, and not all the hospitals in this country, are prepared to handle patients when they come in. I think continuing to speed up the manufacturing of these experimental drugs that seem to have met with some success in previous cases are important. And I do think trying to arrive at the source of this, of where it's actually happening in West Africa, and trying to keep it there and deal with it there so it doesn't spread and become a pandemic around the world are the right moves. I do think it took a while to get to this point for the White House to take it seriously. I wish a lot of these measures had been in place earlier. We're still just talking about one case, and unfortunately the man passed away. It's important to point out that no system is perfect. I mean, the man misled people at the airport about who he'd been in contact with and where he was coming from.
He lied.
And it was unfortunate.
I mean, I know, but Senator, I know the man is dead, and it's not politic to speak ill of the dead, but this man went to the airport, lied about his contact with an Ebola victim who actually died, this poor woman who was pregnant and had Ebola, and then he got on a flight and came to the United States. He has at least exposed dozens of people in this country. Let's hope that none of them actually get the disease, but he's not going to be the last guy who tries to get out of an Ebola-infected country and get to a place with modern medical care, is he?
That's right. And I mean, look, we have to look 3 steps ahead on these things. And, for example, if there were a pandemic breakout in Central America, let's say in Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador, it can threaten the stability of those countries. You could see a mass migration problem as a result of it. You could certainly see governments fail in Africa if this continues to take the toll that it has. And let's not forget the human aspect of this. I mean, if you see some of the videos and the pictures and the stories, these are children and young women and young families that are being just wiped out by this disease. So, look, I think there are things we can do to help, but ultimately we're facing something that has no established foolproof protocol. Our hope is that we'll continue to focus on it and figure it out. And meanwhile, there is another healthcare outbreak in America that's not receiving nearly as much
enterovirus.
Enterovirus that has killed a number of children. There was a case diagnosed in Florida yesterday, and it's not quite clear why this virus is now actually killing people, and a lot of young children as well. So there are 2 healthcare things we need to be keeping an eye on.
Senator Rubio, on the enterovirus, we had this huge influx, tens of thousands of children who came across our border illicitly and then were spread to the rest of the country by the federal government, putting them on planes and flying them off to various communities. And then right behind that, a month or two, we get this enterovirus. Is there a connection there? Because nobody seems willing.
I'm not ruling anything out, except I haven't seen any evidence that points to that. I will say enterovirus has been around. We've known about this, and the vast majority of people that get it get flu-like symptoms, but it goes away and you move on. It doesn't kill people the way it is now. So we have a lot more to learn about what is it about this enterovirus and the impact it's having, especially on children, that's changed. Has it mutated? Is there something new happening here? Again, we're going to have to figure this out. Why it's happening this way, I don't know the answer. I wouldn't want to speculate until we do about it. Certainly we should look at every option, and we should not let political correctness rule out learning and getting to the bottom of it. But I have not seen evidence of that, although I've heard it speculated about in the media.
Senator, let's talk about the Islamic State. We've got Syria and Assad. We don't necessarily want him to win, and we apparently are not advocating for him to win. We've got this Free Syrian Army, so-called, which is kind of a mystery or maybe a Pandora's box. We don't necessarily want them to win against Assad. We've got the Islamic State, and the president now has come around to the position where he says we have to defeat them, but he's already saying it's going to be years. It sounds like from the talk that we should prepare ourselves for decades, as though he's saying this isn't my problem. This will be solved by some future president, maybe President Rubio. We don't even know who we're fighting against or for at this point, and the president refuses to admit that the Islamic State is somehow Islamic. I want your take on it, if you don't mind.
Well, we have to be honest with who they are. They are a radical Sunni Islamic movement that is trying to establish an Islamic Sunni caliphate that stretches from Lebanon to Syria, Iraq, Jordan, what we know is Israel, down into Saudi Arabia, all the Gulf kingdoms, and Turkey. That's their goal. In fact, they'd like to get all the way to Spain. So that is their goal, and we have to be clear about what it is that motivates them. Now, perhaps they share a vision of Islam that is different from the majority of Muslims in the world, but it is Islamic at its core, and that's why it's important that to the extent possible, we get the Islamic world to condemn their ideology and their theology, because according to all the imams I hear on television and the ones that speak out, they say that this doesn't reflect their teachings. Well, it's important you go out there and say that consistently and all the time. That being said, they have to be defeated militarily. They're not just a religious movement here. This is an army with weapons who are capable of taking territory and capable of holding territory. I agree with the airstrikes. I think they were important, but I have never believed that they can solely be defeated from the air. Someone is going to have to defeat them on the ground. Now, the president has put all his eggs in the local forces basket. He's basically saying, we're hopeful that Syrian rebels and Kurdish forces and some new miraculous Iraqi army will defeat them. I hope so too, but I doubt it. I think it's going to have to take a coalition of countries implementing ground forces led by the United States in some capacity with special operations forces or something to put on the ground a capable force to defeat them. I don't think that means 150,000 troops in a full-scale invasion of Iraq. But I do believe it's going to have to take some ground forces to defeat this group. It's just that simple.
Well, we have boots on the ground right now, 1,600 or so military men and women on the ground right now. Does this mean that we have to put some boots on the ground, because it's more boots on the ground? Because it sounds like everybody else who is capable of putting soldiers on the ground is unwilling to do it at this point, especially with the United States saying we're not going to do it.
Even if they did. Let's say tomorrow the Turks woke up and said we're going to send our army forces in there, and they're capable fighters. The truth of the matter is that you cannot put together a coalition of ground forces to defeat ISIL without American leadership involved in it. Maybe there'll be more Turkish troops than American troops, but you're going to need American troops on the ground to call in strikes, to gather intelligence, to train and coordinate with close air support. You're going to need that at some point. Again, we're not talking about thousands of people, and I didn't want this to happen. I'm not rooting for war here. I just know that the alternative can't be that ISIL gets to stay. That is not an acceptable alternative. There is no way you can contain them or live with them or learn to accept them. This is not an acceptable outcome. And the longer we take to realize it, the more painful, more expensive, and more difficult it's going to be to defeat them.
Senator, let me ask you about this. We've told the FBI and others to keep their hands off and their ears out of local mosques in America, and yet it seems that some of those local mosques and some Muslims in America have become radicalized in this country. We're seeing them show up. I think the man who was involved in the beheading may be one of those radicalized, perhaps in prison. But we're being told by the president, no, we can't do this. So what do we do about American Muslims who are being radicalized inside our own country? That seems like a huge threat to this country.
Well, I don't think any of us are comfortable with the government going into houses of worship. That being said, if the house of worship is actually being used as a front for radical training, we have an obligation to our country to do so. Beyond it, I would say, however, that the newer threat is that a large number of these newly radicalized people are being radicalized on the Internet. In essence, they have access now to videos and all sorts of social media that is recruiting them that way. And we've seen increasing evidence that the radicalization is actually happening on the Internet and social media in that realm. And that also has to be monitored and kept an eye on. But ultimately, look, if you've got one individual living in the middle of somewhere who decides to become radicalized because of something he saw on video and is inspired by something he reads in one of these online magazines and goes out and commits an atrocity at God forbid, a mall or a hospital or a school somewhere, that's going to be difficult to track. But that's the new threat that we face today. And that's something that's uncomfortable for us to accept, that there are American citizens who have now joined up with the enemy in a new kind of war unlike anything we've ever faced before. But that's one of the risks and one of the threats and one of the challenges of this new century that we're going to need to respond to.
I guess, Senator, I have the same discomfort about the houses of worship, but I think if the Church of Aryan Nations of 30 years ago that was advocating violence against people because of their skin color was doing something like that, we wouldn't have hesitated to have federal agents go in and take a listen. So it seems to me to be a bit discriminatory to say, but when it comes to Muslim mosques, that we're going to keep hands off. Senator?
No, that's absolutely right. Okay, look, so you don't want to be haphazard about these sorts of things. But the bottom line is there is evidence that a house of worship, no matter what denomination, is being used as a place to incite, recruit, train, and carry out attacks and radicalize people. You can't ignore it. You're going to have to address it, irrespective of what the name on the door is.
Senator, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the generosity with your time, and we always appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.